All right, big questions tonight on The Nation at 9. On your screens now, by snubbing Pakistan on 4 crucial points, has the ICJ exposed the weakness in its overall legal arguments? That's the big question tonight. Also, on your screen, question number 2. Can India turn this first victory into actual consular access is the big question, because Pakistan has been non-committal even after the ICJ gave us provisional orders and provisional measures. Will international pressure and public opinion, is it capable of guiding the final verdict in India's favor as well? That's a question that I'm going to ask my panelists tonight. Also, is Pakistan's denial after these provisional measures was given out an indication of nervousness in the Pakistani camp? And the last question I'll be asking tonight on The Nation at 9, what is the end game for Pakistan, and is India prepared to deal beyond the ICJ? That's a question that I'll put to my colleagues and my panelists tonight. Before we do any of that, let me just introduce our panel tonight. Shiv Shankar Mukherjee joins us. He's a former diplomat. He joins me in the studio, as does Professor Madhav Nalpat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Also with us will be Colin Gonzalez. He's a senior advocate. He'll be joining us in just a bit. Aman Sinha will be joining us from the BJP. He's a lawyer and the spokesperson of that party. Brahma Chellaney, strategic affairs experts. He'll join us via Skype. General Malik, VP Malik, former chief of the Indian Army, will be joining us from Chandigarh. Arsalan Bhatti will represent Pakistan on the panel. He's a bureau chief of Dunia News. He joins us via Skype. And Jack Parak is our correspondent. He's joining us live from Brussels. And Dr. Chintan Chandrachud, lawyer and a scholar, he's joining us from London. I'd like to start off with Jack Parak, if I could. Jack, would it be fair to say today that despite the fact this was just an initial hearing and the fact these are just provisional measures, the fact that Pakistan got bamboozled legally by the ICJ on all the 4 objections they had raised, would it be fair to say that India at least carried the day in spectacular fashion today?
I think it was certainly a big win for the Indian camp in this issue, but I don't think it was unexpected, to be honest. In my experience of covering these kinds of cases and international legal issues, I think there was a sense that that would happen, specifically mainly just because it results in, and at the end of the day, circles around a man's life. And if you execute someone, it is the thing that cannot be returned. Obviously, there's no reversal. So the ICJ would have always expressed a desire to make sure that this is a slowed down process. The question is now, will this ruling, this judgment, build enough international pressure on Pakistan to see, firstly, consular access to Kubash and Jadhav, and also whether there will be another trial. There's a lot more to go in this process now, but from the Indian perspective, this certainly is what they would have been hoping for.
Clearly. Also the fact that Pakistan has already started giving out statements, Jack, just hours after Ronnie Abraham read out the court's observation today, that, and they believe this is their interpretation, however erroneous it might be, that these are not binding measures. They believe this is just a suggestion really to Pakistan to make sure Jadhav is not executed while the trial is going on. That's also expected to an extent, I would believe, and Pakistan of course will perhaps try and make its stance more rigid from here on in, just to save some public face here.
Indeed. Well, these are just the provisional hearings. This has been a very short series of legal events in what would ordinarily take a lot more time. These kind of legal battles go on for much longer. What the ICJ is doing is saying to Pakistan, look, if you execute him, you will be in breach of future more concrete rulings that are likely. They're advising Pakistan on the ICJ's position. Pakistan, conversely, if they say that, if they didn't believe that the court had jurisdiction, then presumably they wouldn't really accept the ruling or the advisory judgments anyway. So it's a complicated situation, and the Pakistani response now will be closely watched. But I think what you can expect now, after the ICJ has made this ruling, is that other international partners and players in India's allies specifically will come out in favour, and you will see a support for the ICJ, which all the countries that are signed up to believe in this jurisdiction, I would argue.
Right, quick question, Jack, before I open this up to debate for my panelists. The fact that you mentioned the international pressure, public opinion, as well as international press, how much of it all can actually guide the ICJ in its ruling? Do they go strictly by the facts of the case? Because someone mentioned to me earlier, the more pressure, the more public opinion India can build against Pakistan in this particular case, the more helpful it will be ultimately towards the final verdict.
So as with any court, the ICJ would of course say that it is an independent judicial body that is not influenced by any kind of political or media pressure. But obviously in cases of these nature, and especially such high profile ones, it can play out in a different way. It's as simple as that. So I think the ICJ will continue to just try and play by the facts, and the judges will certainly say that they have looked at the legal case put forward by both Pakistan and India and ruled on that.
All right, Jack, I'll ask you to stay on with us if you can. We've also got Subrata Mukherjee with us right now. He is a friend of Mr. Jadhav's, and before I go to my other panelists, I'd like to ask Mr. Mukherjee his thoughts today. Mr. Mukherjee, clearly round one has gone to India. It has rekindled hope perhaps for Mr. Jadhav and his family, but we have to be very careful and we have to be aware that there's a long battle ahead. Tell me what's going through your head today after the ICJ ruling.
Yeah, definitely, after hearing whatever ICJ has given the verdict in favor of India, that is Kulbhushan Jadhav, we were very happy, at least whatever the stay order has been there for the hanging part. But the second part is also there, now how, he can be brought back to India. That is the main concern, basically. And definitely, I think so, Indian government will be doing their best to bring Kulbhushan Jadhav back. And I think so, all are there with him. And we pray to the God so that he can be, released soon from Pak jail and safe to India back.
All right, might be a long way still. Stay with us, Mr. Mukherjee. Let me open this up to my panelists today. Shiv Shankar Mukherjee and Madhav Nalpat here in the studio. Professor Nalpat, clearly, as I keep saying, India carried the day. There's a long road ahead, but this does buff up India's case first off. And the fact that the ICJ completely bamboozled Pakistan and their four main objections, I of course will elucidate those four objections and how the ICJ struck them down, it does give some hope that if not anytime soon, but the ICJ at least telling Pakistan they were wrong on all counts, be it jurisdiction, be it India's plea or irreparable prejudice as India has had appealed and pleaded in court as well. Do you think that that is sufficient for the Indian side first off to have a big battle won in a long war that might turn out to be quite long?
Well, of course, ultimately what counts is the final battle, but I would like to say that I think it's the government of Prime Minister Modi needs to be commended for the efforts that it is putting in to secure the release of an innocent man. So I'm quite convinced the man is innocent. Otherwise, India would never have gone to the ICJ and taken the risk of all kinds of evidence being brought about Mr. Jadhav if there was such evidence that was genuine. Now the Pakistanis might bring evidence, but I'm sure it will be concocted and it will be demonstratively concocted. So this is definitely a good first step, but there's a long way ahead, quite very frankly. And also the fear is that the Pakistan military does not recognize any restraints on its own behavior. So what the Pakistan military does is known only to General Bajwa and his corps commander.
And that apprehension, Mr. Mukherjee, has been shared with me throughout the day today as well, despite the fact that India carried the day and Pakistan's legal argument wasn't really tenable, that it had no jurisdiction. The ICJ did. They said that we do. They also said the court has to be completely seized off and be told of what they're doing to make sure the execution doesn't go. And for the duration of the trial, when the final verdict comes, Pakistan cannot execute Kulbhushan Jadhav. All those are victories, small ones, but victories nonetheless.
Well, no one's denying that. But beyond just analyzing and taking satisfaction from the verdict, if one can just extend the debate, certainly, exactly as Professor Nalpat said, the government can take satisfaction from the fact that they invested a lot of political capital and a tremendous amount of effort of every kind, diplomatic, legal. Now they approach the ICJ to save the life of a man who has been unjustly accused and convicted in a kangaroo court of murder. We have, I won't expand on what the ICJ has said. You've already explained how they've tossed out all the specious arguments of the Pakistanis and supported all that we said. The fact is, I think what we have achieved is the limited objective, I think, of, I'm now looking just beyond the judgment, limited objective of saving Kulbhushan Jadhav from being, you know, immediately being hanged out of hand, or probably the fact that he may not be hanged at all, and, you know, the way the interim judgment of the court has been worded, it's entirely likely that the final result will be that of a mistrial. Having said that, beyond this limited objective, of which we can take satisfaction, of having saved this man's life, temporarily or perhaps finally, nothing else is going to change. Pakistan is not going to change its course. Pakistan will squeeze this affair itself for all that it is worth. We would, if, for instance, Pakistan refuses to adhere to the final judgment of the ICJ and the matter goes to the Security Council, China will veto it. So to expect that the international community, the pressure from the international community will increase to a point where Pakistan, even in a limited fashion, changes its behavior is, you know,
that's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Let's just call a spade a spade. It's not going to happen right now.
It's not going to happen. Even consular access is not going to happen.
Yes, currently, because even they've already started saying, Sartaj Aziz, of course, has come out with a statement saying that this is no binding argument really. We're not bound by what the ICJ says. All it is, for them at least, is a suggestion. Arsalan Bhatti joins us from Pakistan. Mr. Bhatti, let's limit our argument today on what happened in court today. Mr. Bhatti, you kept saying there is no jurisdiction. The ICJ has completely refuted that. They say we do have enough prima facie evidence to suggest that jurisdiction does exist. They've instructed the Pakistan government to make sure Jadhav is not executed for at least the course of the trial till the final verdict comes. All these, of course, are statements of facts, and all these do show Pakistan in somewhat weaker light than you would like, Mr. Bhatti.
We still have to wait for final decision. There is no win-win situation for India yet.
No, we're not claiming a win-win.
This is the provisional relief.
Nobody is claiming a win-win, sir. All I'm saying is Pakistan's legal argument was thrown out of court today. You have to admit that. It's unfair.
No legal. One has to, when two parties goes in court, one has to win, one has to lose. There is no win-win situation for anybody nor India. This is a provisional relief for India. And the way ICJ taken up this case and so briskly, it was unprecedented. There is no doubt about it. Number one. Number two, moreover, the real trial will begin now when Pakistan team definitely come up with any evidences against Kulbhushan and others' involvement in his involvement in Pakistan. Now, what the International Court of Justice says, I still say it is not binding, but being a nation, being the country, Pakistan is not a rogue nation. Pakistan has no kangaroo courts. What the people were saying in just in your program, that was very much a military court. In every country, in every democratic country, there is a military court for the special cases, especially to deal with terrorists.
You see, even the ICJ has said, Mr. Bhatti, that the circumstances of the arrest are in dispute right now. You won't even concede that. I'm not claiming a huge victory for India, apart from the fact that India did carry the day and Pakistani arguments weren't really upheld by the court. Now that in itself, sir, is a fact. I'm not making it up. I'm not being jingoistic. I'm not going over the top. I'm not chest thumping. I'm merely relating to you what the ICJ said today. Now I want my other guests to come in as well. Colin Gonzalez, Aman Sinha, as well as Brahma Chellaney. Aman Sinha, would you like to respond to Mr. Bhatti?
Sir, well, first of all, let me say, Athar, that we had filed a petition with prayers for a provisional measures, and all our prayers have been granted by the International Court of Justice. It's a unanimous decision of the 11 judges of the International Court of Justice from 11 different nationalities, and both our prayers have been granted, and all the objections that Pakistan had, they have all been summarily rejected. So obviously, in all objectivity, it has to be termed as a victory. It's a victory for all Indians. It's a victory for Kulbhushan Jadhav and his family, and it's a matter of satisfaction that under Prime Ministership of Narendra Modi ji, the government of India has moved swiftly and ensured that justice is done to each and every of its citizens. Now let me say, as far as the judgment, as far as the order of ICJ is concerned, there are three parts to it. First of all, the execution has been stayed till the final disposal or final outcome of the ICJ, proceedings which will go on. Thereafter, Pakistan has been directed to take all provisional measures to ensure protection of Kulbhushan Jadhav, and not only that, Athar, they have to report back to International Court of Justice at the earliest possible opportunity as to what all measures they have taken. Now in these measures, obviously consular access, etc. would also be there, and all our rights with respect to Vienna Convention and rights of Kulbhushan Jadhav in Vienna Convention and other treaties such as International Covenant for Political and Civil Rights, etc. They are all going to be protected and preserved. Therefore, it's a comprehensive order which addresses all the concerns that India had at this stage.
Aman, I'll give you that, but there are some concerns. I'd like to highlight them at this point.
And the team which was representing
Aman,
there.
I do agree that this is an order which, first of all, throughout the Pakistan objections on 4 counts, and they upheld India's plea and prayer, of course, clearly suggesting, I think I keep going to this is the most important part of the entire order to me, when Ronnie Abraham said that India's plea that irreparable prejudice might be exercised against Mr. Jadhav in this case has been upheld, so that the court also believes that there is a danger to Mr. Jadhav's life while the trial is going on. And I'd like Colin Gonsalves to come in at this point. Colin, one second, just give me a second. Colin Gonsalves.
The urgency in the matter.
It did. I mentioned that. I mentioned that. Aman, give me a second now. Colin Gonsalves, now, right at the beginning I said this is just an instance of India carrying the day. I was speaking to an eminent jurist earlier in the day, and he did explain to me that there is absolutely no mechanism that exists, whether within the statutes of the ICJ or anywhere else in international law, that can make sure that whatever the verdict might be at the end, that the ICJ cannot really implement it in Pakistan unless the Pakistanis are actually likely to follow it. Is that something that we need to be careful of before we start celebrating prematurely?
Yes, I think in victory we should use very moderate language and not go to Pakistan to make it an issue where the people on the Pakistan side who are deciding policy decide to retaliate by taking his life notwithstanding the judgment of the ICJ. The Pakistan army is quite capable of doing an extreme act like that, notwithstanding international opinion, and I do hope international opinion actually helps to moderate the stand the policy makers in Pakistan will take. So our language on television and all these places is very important in this debate. But let me say one thing. There's a remarkable aspect of this case, which is the decision to go to the ICJ
has also said that this order is going to be binding on both the parties.
I don't think.
No, hold on. Let Colin Gonsalves finish his point. Go ahead, sir, please.
Yeah. The remarkable aspect is the decision to go to the ICJ. And I would like to know, I would love to know the identity of that Indian who thought that let's go to the ICJ, because India has never gone to the ICJ for years and years. And India is generally loath to go into an international forum and accept binding jurisdiction because it opens up international use of the ICJ. So somebody had a brilliant idea, and I don't think there's anybody in Pakistan, I don't think there's a single person in Pakistan who would have expected in the Jadhav case that India would go to the ICJ. That's point number one. Secondly, the decision to focus on consular access was a winning point.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have consular access, if you don't have consular access and you can't go to your High Commission and ask for a good lawyer, the trial goes. Whether it's a military tribunal or a criminal court, it doesn't matter. If the trial is vitiated by the fact that he could not get advice of the High Commission and choose his own lawyer, the trial goes. So even though it's an interim order,
I have some other questions on consular access.
Virtually, I think,
give me a second now. Give me a second. I have some other questions on consular access and whether or not that can be a reality. But just give me a second with Brahma Chellaney, who's joining us. Also Tulsidas Pawar, another friend of Mr. Jadhav's. But first to Mr. Chellaney. Brahma Chellaney, I believe we need to be careful first off before we start patting ourselves in the back too much. This is just round one. And given the fact that, given the history that India has had with the ICJ as well as other international fora, nobody really could have guaranteed that we would have carried day one today, but we did. Now we can be happy about that, we can be satisfied about that, but we need to be extremely careful on how we handle this from here on end, because as someone mentioned right now, the Pakistani army, just to spite India, is completely capable of doing the unthinkable here, despite what the ICJ said.
Well, I agree with you. If Pakistan does not abide by the interim order of the ICJ, it will expose itself thoroughly as a rogue state. To be clear, this has come as a shot in the arm for India, diplomatically, because it has come at a time when there was no hope to save Mr. Jadhav's life. But Pakistan's response to this interim ruling also underscores the challenge that India faces. Pakistan is saying they do not accept ICJ's jurisdiction that relates to national security. And the challenge for India really is how to deal with a neighbor that violates canons of civilized conduct and engages in barbaric acts, as exemplified by the recent killing of 2 Indian soldiers.
Mr. Chellaney, of course, that's the larger question we're asking today, but I'd like to limit our conversation today to what the ICJ has said and what the roadmap here is from here on in. I also believe, Brahma Chellaney, your audio is slightly, I think it's slightly problematic. We'll try and rectify that in a bit. So let me just go quickly across to Tulsidas Pawar and get his opinion before we take a break and come back to the actual legal nitty-gritty of the case. तुलसीदास पवार, शुक्रिया हमसे जुड़ने के लिए। और आज का दिन जो है कहा जा रहा है कि एटलीस्ट राउंड 1 जो है इंडिया को जा चुका है और देयर इज सम होप कि इस केस में विक्ट्री अल्टीमेटली इंडिया की होगी। आप ये बताइए कि जाधव जी के परिवार और उनके दोस्तों में आज क्या चल रहा है, आपके दिमाग में क्या चल रहा है?
आज बहुत एक साल से हम लोग प्रेशर में थे, टेंशन में थे, और आज जो फैसला आया है उसकी तो हमें 100% उम्मीद थी। मैंने आपके स्टूडियो में भी कहा था कि फैसला अपने तरफ भी होने वाला है और ऐसा ही हुआ। और आज जो हमारे दोस्त लोग आपके थे मीडिया वाले, उन्होंने देखा है यहाँ का मंजर कैसा था, कितनी खुशियाँ यहाँ पर दिखाई दे रही थी, पटाखे फूट रहे थे, मिठाइयाँ बांटे जा रही थी। सुबह से लेके आज शाम तक मीडिया वाले जब तक थे यहाँ पर तब ये माहौल चला था। और हमें खुशी है कि, और हमें जितनी खुशी है उससे तो दुगनी चौगनी खुशी उनके घर वालों को होगी, ये मुझे उसमें कोई संदेह नहीं।
All right, Mr. Pawar, thank you for joining us. We'll of course also introduce Dr. Chintan Chandrachud. We spoke to him last time as well. He is a lawyer practicing law out of London. We'll speak to him in just a bit. I'll come back to all my guests in a bit as well. I have many questions. We have at least half an hour to discuss this. We'll take a very quick break at this point. When we come back, we'll go on uninterrupted for 24-25 minutes after that. But first, take a short break. Come right back. You're watching The Nation at 9. Welcome back. You're watching The Nation at 9. Ambassador Shiv Shankar Mukherjee is with me in the studio, so I'm going to put the question that has been troubling me all day to him. Now, Ambassador Mukherjee, despite what the ICJ has given out in its provisional measures today, despite a moral victory today for India and to some extent a legal and diplomatic victory as well on the international stage, the fate of Mr. Jadhav, if we come down to the basics of it, still rests in the hands of Pakistani generals. And that's something we have to reconcile with if we really want to do our utmost best to save Mr. Jadhav's life. Am I wrong here?
No, you're not wrong. You're absolutely right. What we have achieved, apart from the moral and legal, vindication of our submission to the International Court of Justice, what we have achieved, I think, is the fact that it is unlikely, certainly not impossible, but unlikely that Pakistan would take the extreme step of ignoring the court's verdict completely, or in fact by organizing the murder of this man in custody, as was done in the case of Sarojit Singh. So I for one do not put this beyond an army that does not follow the code of the soldier, beheads soldiers and acts in every way, in a way that goes beyond the pale, is perfectly capable of ignoring international opinion. And secondly, they know they are safe enough from, they are not safe from condemnation, they are not safe from international pressure, they are not safe from other countries finger pointing and being known as the pariah of the world. But having developed a thick skin, they know that China will veto anything to do with sanctions in the Security Council. They know that the Organization of Islamic Countries at their meetings will certainly not, will bail them out in terms of some kind of resolution which will not condemn Pakistan, or in fact will actually point the fingers to India. So geopolitically and in terms of the hard realities on the ground, what we have achieved, I think, is in terms of the objective, specific objective of trying to save the life of Jadhav, an innocent man who is being condemned to death by a rogue regime. Maybe we've achieved that, but in the larger, broader picture, I think what you said a little earlier, that it is premature to think that we have actually condemned Pakistan, put it in the dock, is certainly not the case.
All right, Ambassador Mukherjee, Joshua Payne joins us as well. He joins us. He's an analyst, of course, and a research scholar at the Max Planck Institute. Thank you, Joshua, for joining us. But first, I'd like to go to Chintan Chandrachud and your thoughts. Chintan, I actually read your piece just before, I think it was published online as well, and I was going through it as well, and you did correctly pinpoint what India had to do to win a victory in the first round, which it has today, of course. But now the real battle begins. The fact that Pakistan doesn't really care that much about international condemnation because they have a safety net of a veto at the UN Security Council, if it goes to that at all. There's also very important for India, and it's imperative, I might add, that whatever happens from here on in, the final verdict, hopefully in India's favor, from India's perspective, must come before August, which is when the clemency period for Jadhav within Pakistan comes to an end. If it comes after that, would we have, effectively condemned Mr. Jadhav then?
Absolutely. So today's decision has 4 significant elements. The first is that the court has held that Pakistan must take all measures within its disposal to ensure that Mr. Jadhav cannot be executed. Second, and equally importantly, the court has also asked for Pakistan to inform the court about what measures it has taken to comply with its order. Third is an important jurisdictional victory. So the court has held, at least prima facie, that it has jurisdiction to decide this case, and that the 2008 bilateral agreement does not preclude the court's jurisdiction. The fourth point, which comes to the question you've asked, was on the matter of urgency. And the court says something very interesting here. The court said that even if we were to assume the facts most favorable to Pakistan, Pakistan's argument, of course, being that there's a long clemency procedure and so on ahead. Even then, this is a matter of urgency, and therefore provisional measures must be granted. Therefore, even on the expiry of the term, so even once August 2017 is completed, Pakistan still remains under an binding international law obligation to ensure that Mr. Jadhav is not executed until and unless the court makes its judgment.
No, but what's the worst that can happen? Chintan, before I go to Joshua Payne, let me just ask you, what's the worst that can really happen? Let's talk about the worst case scenario, because I believe we have to be prepared for any of it. If Pakistan decides, and we've seen statements coming out of Pakistan already, just hours after the ICJ pronounced its provisional measures, Pakistani Foreign Minister, or the equivalent of that post, Sartaj Aziz, has called these provisional measures just suggestions and has argued that Pakistan is not bound by any of these. Now, they're still arguing about jurisdiction, even when the ICJ has very clearly said that it has jurisdiction over the case, and the Vienna Convention overrides the bilateral treaty of 2008. Now, if Pakistan and the generals in Pakistan decide to go their way anyway, is there a mechanism that can perhaps ensure that whatever the final verdict be, whenever it comes, even if it is pro-India, that it has to be implemented by Pakistan? There is no such mechanism as far as I know.
Sure. So there are 2 distinct questions rolled into one. The first is whether this is, as a formal matter, binding on Pakistan. and the position there is clear. This decision on provisional measures today is binding as a matter of international law upon Pakistan, and if Pakistan chooses not to comply with the decision, then it will be in breach of its international law obligation.
All right.
Having said that, whether or not this decision can be enforced is a separate question. The best that we can perhaps hope for in the event, which hopefully will not happen, but in the event that Pakistan chooses not to comply, is a declaratory judgment from the International Court suggesting that Pakistan has breached its obligation.
All right,
in other words, it's a form of moral censure.
Yes, moral censure,
sanction.
but not much beyond that. Soli Sorabji joins us, India's eminent jurist and senior lawyer as well. I'll come back to you, Aman Sinha. I have a specific question for you, but I just want to introduce Soli Sorabji to the panel and our viewers. Soli Sorabji, it's a moral victory today. India carried the day. Its legal arguments, of course, were superior to that of Pakistan, but beyond all of that, beyond the fact that Pakistan has been morally censured by what the ICJ said today, what is your outlook for the case? It's going to be a long battle ahead, and the battle has just started.
Yeah, as the battle has started, but it started on the right note. We have the first step in the battle is in India's favor, and no question about it. Pakistan, I don't think, can afford to flout the order of the ICJ. If it does so, it's committing political suicide, diplomatic suicide. Now I think better sense will prevail and they will comply with it. They have to. After all, suppose the other way around. The court has decided against us and in their favor. Then would they not have complied with it? So they can't play hot and cold. You've gone to the International Court, the highest court, and you are in breach of international obligations, especially about refusal to provide consular access, and you must accept it. And I don't think how Pakistan, whatever it may do, some nitpicking, can get out of the ruling given by the court.
The court has...
1 minute I want to say,
yes.
Please understand,
yes.
1 minute. What does the court ruling prove? First of all, it establishes that India has a good Brahma Chellaney case.
Yes.
Otherwise they won't have dealt with it. It also establishes accepts India's plea. There is urgency in the matter. An urgency because unless stay is given, unless Jadhav's execution is stayed, the whole thing will become infructuous. And that situation can't be faced by any court, and they won't allow it, and they haven't.
All right. Mr. Sorabji, one more question before I go to our foreign guest, Joshua Payne, who's waiting, of course. My question, of course, is pertaining to what the court has observed today. They indicated that any execution of Mr. Jadhav would probably not take place as a shot by Pakistan before the month of August. This means, and they've agreed, there is a risk that an execution could take place any moment thereafter. Hence, the court has said that during the course of the trial, Pakistan cannot execute Mr. Jadhav, and they adhere to Indian theory, the Indian appeal, that there was irreparable prejudice that was perhaps going to be exercised against Mr. Jadhav. I believe that was the moral victory we were looking for, really. Now the court will consider the merits of the case, and that's a separate story altogether.
Quite right, quite right. Well, of course, irreparable prejudice. What happens if Jadhav is executed? There is irreparable. How do you bring him back to life? The main thing is jurisdiction question. Prima facie has been held against Pakistan. The court has held it as jurisdiction and also given these orders, passed these orders.
All right.
And I don't think Pakistan really, except it wants to commit, as I may repeat, political suicide, diplomatic suicide, can afford to flout it.
Well, it's Pakistan, so all bets are off, Mr. Sorabji, but stay with us. Joshua Payne joins us from Luxembourg. Joshua, first thoughts today. There is consensus that the day was carried by India. It is the start of a long legal battle, but this is perhaps the best sort of provisional measures India could have hoped for. There was no guarantee of it, but India came through.
Yes, I think for India, this is the provisional measures order they were looking for. I'd also note, just following up on your last guest, the court has not finally determined jurisdiction, and Pakistan may well object to jurisdiction, and the court may well need to finally determine jurisdiction before it proceeds to the merits.
Do you believe that international pressure, given the fact that provisional measures went India's way, Joshua, and the actual trial will now begin, do you believe that international pressure, public opinion, can somehow guide the final verdict, or is it the case, as all juries and all courts like to believe, that they only concentrate on facts? This is a rather special case. This is a very complicated case, since the circumstances of the arrests are also disputed, the circumstances of charges are also disputed. Do you believe adverse public opinion, international press, or international opinion against Pakistan, if they decide to defy the provisional orders, could also have a bearing on the case? What's your take on that?
Sorry, this is before the ICJ you're talking?
Yes, for the ICJ, yes, and the trial itself.
Yes. So were there to be an execution before the merits judgment, I think the ICJ will, as one of your previous guests said, at the very least make a declaratory judgment saying Pakistan has breached its orders. I don't think it's ruled out that the ICJ would be open to looking at other remedies sought by India, for example, compensation. It should also be noted that if Pakistan were to breach the provisional measures order, a costs order, an adverse costs order could be made against Pakistan.
All right, those of course are options still open to India. Aman Sinha wanted to come in. Aman Sinha, make your point, then I have a specific question for you. Go ahead, Aman.
No, Adhar, just on a brief factual note, I wanted to say that there was a battle in ICJ about 18 years back, and Mr. Sorabji was leading India in that battle, and we won that battle also against Pakistan. And the point that Chintan Chandrachud was making about the binding nature of decisions of ICJ is also correct, because under Article 59 of the ICJ statute, the decisions of the ICJ are binding upon the party states, but member states. But let me say that it was unprecedented that they made a note of that in the judgment itself. So therefore it goes on to reflect the fact that, all the noise that Pakistan was trying to create, that they would not accept it and all those things which you might have heard in last 24 hours, I think the ICJ was also mindful of that. What was your question, Athar?
No, my question really is, in the worst case scenario, even though our interpretation is that whatever provisional measures the ICJ has given, they are binding on Pakistan. You're already hearing noises not just from their foreign ministry but also their foreign minister saying that they are not binding, and there is no mechanism, Aman, as you're well aware, under which or through which the ICJ can implement their orders. It's happened in the past, it could well happen now. What then? What does India do then if the ultimate objective and the only priority is to make sure Jadhav is not harmed? What is the safeguard against Pakistan going its own way? What if they want to risk international humiliation? It won't be the first time for them. What then?
Pakistan already stands isolated in the international community, and if they are going to behave as a rogue state, then that will have its consequences, and a whole international community will go against them. There is a mechanism which is stipulated and laid down. The UN Security Council is empowered to take action, and please do not forget that India is fully capable of safeguarding its own interests and safeguarding its citizens. If the Indian government can go to this extent to do its utmost to protect life and liberty of one innocent Indian citizen, they are not going to give it up. We are going to pursue it diligently before all forums and ensure that justice is meted out to Kulbhushan Yadav. He is freed and released at the earliest possible opportunity.
But Aman, also the fact
and
that
it also reflects
Aman,
that this government is...
I do agree with you there. The Indian government has made a commitment,
yes,
and it will take it to the logical conclusion. But you also will agree that in case the verdict, the final verdict goes India's way, and I
Indeed
hope it does, Pakistan is more than likely to go to the UN, and the UN has a very crucial ally, China of Pakistan, and that can be problematic. I'm sure you're aware, I'm sure the government is aware of that.
Arthur, I know what you are suggesting and indicating, but let me tell you, India has large number of friends and allies, and even irrespective of that, the government of India, the people of India are fully capable of handling and meeting any situation if it so arises. But I am sure Pakistan, which is now known as a epicenter of global terror, if it is civilized state of any nature, it will abide by judgment of the International Court of Justice, and it will respect the order of the International Court of Justice. In fact, if it would have been in Pakistan's interest itself if it would have released Kulbhushan Jadhav. He was a innocent Indian citizen, and they would have gained in terms of their perception internationally.
All right, fair enough.
But let us see what Pakistan does. But whatever government of India can do to protect life and liberty of its citizens, we will do it.
All right, closing comments now, since I'm short on time. Colin Gonzalez, where do you see the end game for all of this, be it for Pakistan or for India? What is your sense of how it's going to play out? Even if I give you a hypothetical that ultimately the final verdict, let's just say and hope, is a pro-India verdict, that surely will not be the end game. Where do you see this going now?
Well, I hope that India uses this very unique opportunity where from a position of strength, India starts negotiating with countries in South Asia as to how to deal. Then they must do this quickly. They must do this negotiation very quickly and decisively, how to deal with citizens of other countries, and perhaps agree that in certain cases the death sentence would not be imposed. And India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Nepal, all these countries will deal with the citizens of other countries in a slightly different way, particularly in cases where it is alleged that they are spies or they carried out a hidden war against the state and so on. Maybe come up with a more benign kind of a regime, an agreement, where the death sentence is not imposed in these cases.
All right, Arsalan Bhatti, my simple question to you, can India at least expect Pakistan to honor the provisional measures, and can you assure us, not that you're a government spokesperson, but what's your sense? Will the Pakistani government honor the provisional measure, and can we rest assured that during the course of the trial, no harm will come to Mr. Jadhav?
Already Pakistan has assured ICJ that he will not be executed till the end of March 2017. Already the undertaking was given in ICJ. I have several times told you that we are not going to execute Jadhav in tomorrow morning, tomorrow evening, or day after tomorrow, or in next week, or in next month. Already he has 3 times appeal, 3 mercy appeals to do. If one appeal is rejected, then he has second chance, then the third chance. Why not go for it?
No, you don't know that we're not going to go for it. I'm sure the Indian government is parallelly going to pursue all legal methods, options available within Pakistan, while of course fighting the case of the ICJ as well. I'm out of time, Mr. Bhatti. I'm out of time, unfortunately. I'm out of time. I have to stop you there. Arsalan Bhatti, thank you for joining us. Chintan Chandrachud, Aman Sinha, Colin Gonzalez, as well as Joshua Payne, Jack Parrock, and Soli Sorabji, Madhav Nalpat, Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, and all those others who joined us tonight for the Nation at 9. It's a big victory for today for India. It carried the day in spectacular fashion, and that's where we end our debate today. But not before we leave. We'll leave you with this. This is your picture of the day. Take your pick.